but I want to share a couple concepts as background so that you learn about me through what I share. The first one is what I call working in the business instead of or versus on the business. And I think this COVID has forced many of us to stop and give us lots of time to think about our business. I know it has me and what to do. And I've been on a lot of these presentations where it's learning different things so that we can make decisions on what to do next. Should I go back to my job? Should I continue on what I'm doing, and so forth? So this first concept was taught to me by my coach and mentor several decades ago. And as I got promoted in my work, I was in manufacturing at a medical device company for a good part of my career and several other medical device companies. I realized that I could get more work done as a department, let's say my engineering department, if I was to back up and look at what we're trying to accomplish, share that with my team, and work what I call on the business instead of in the business. And so I like to use the term zooming in and out, where I would zoom in on a problem or zoom in on a project and help one of my engineers or designers on that particular thing, and then zoom back out to look at the big picture. Because when you're taking a product to market, it's important to get it there first off and do it right the first time. So that was a big help to me. A key to working both in and on the business is, I'm going to read some of this to you. It's to know, formulate, and document and share your organizational strategy with your stakeholders. I think it's pretty common for businesses, especially small ones, not to document and share their strategy, and also not to share it with their stakeholders. And when I say stakeholders, I don't mean just employees, but I mean suppliers, customers, employees, owners, partners, because it's important. When people know and understand their role, regardless of which one of those stakeholders they are, and they understand the strategy and how their role supports that strategy, that's probably a key significant part of it. When they know how their role supports the strategy, workers and other stakeholders are usually more engaged and productive because they know what's going on and they know what their job is. If you're just pushing a button all day and you don't know why you're pushing the button, except for to make money possibly or get orders out, it doesn't make you as motivated. And that applies to owners and management as well. If the management team, big or small, understands what they're trying to accomplish, they're going to be more engaged and motivated to get it done and inspire other folks to do it. An example of this, one of my more recent clients was a medical device manufacturer in Boston, and I met the owner at a trade show where I was presenting, and he said that his business was going to double in the next year. And he goes, I don't have any idea on how I'm going to do this. And so I said, well, I can help you. And after going back and forth for about a month, he says, okay, I want you to help me, because that's what I do as a consultant. And so I said, the first thing I need to do is do an audit and interview your folks. And then let me fly out there and we'll get together as a group and a team. And so it was really interesting because I arrived at their office and we began doing some strategic planning where the owner was sharing more than just the fact that they're going to double and he needs to increase capacity. He was good at pushing and saying, if we just push the button more, we can get everything out. And including him, there were 8 people on this executive team. And 4 of them were brand new. Within 6 weeks, they had been hired. And I said, so during my audit, when I'm interviewing these different people, I said, well, do you know what the purpose of the company is? Do you know what we're trying to achieve? And the only thing they really knew is that they were trying to get more work out because business was going to increase. In this particular case, the owner was also part of sales, and he was really good at his job. And so he could bring more work in than the company could produce. And so it was really important for him to understand that he needed to work on his business and not in it, because he was buried all day long, and help his management team understand what their role was. Even if they didn't know what the strategy was or the mission was, they needed to know what their role was. And I ended up, just because of my background, I ended up talking to a couple of them who said, I have no idea what I'm supposed to be doing. And I said, well, in private, I said, let's make a list of what you think you should be doing. And let's break it into 3 categories. And so we did. And I said, okay, based on my experience and what you just told me, this is what I think you should do 1, 2, and 3. I said, do it for a couple of weeks, and then go tell the owner, here's what I'm doing. How am I on track? And that's what he did. And the owner was impressed, but the owner didn't do any onboarding to help this guy come up to speed on day 1 or 2 or 3. He had to wait like 3 weeks. So I think backing up and thinking about the business, whether you're large or small, it's important to have a strategy, have it documented, and have it shared. In short, we must be constantly working in and on the business and doing this zooming that I'm talking about earlier.
Hey, David.
Yeah.
I got a quick question. What do you, when you're a small business or maybe a sole proprietor or 1 or 2 employees, it's a little harder not to spin off the working in your business segment. I mean, do you think that that's something you should do after hours, or try and make it part of your average day of, I'm going to run the cash register today from noon to 2, but from 2 to 4, I'm going to work on strategy, or do you just kind of, it seems like it's something you would have to actually strategize time for to do, to be able to cut that out of your day.
Yeah, my personal opinion is you got to block out the time, whether it's part of the work day or you do it on the weekend, and you are there for the sole purpose of not working in the business. So don't even take that stuff with you. Just take a pad of paper or your laptop, which is, hard to do if you have your laptop, but, and outline what your strategy is. There's so many books. There's one called One Page Business Plan. It's really not 1 page, it's a whole book, but all the information that you need to get this on paper is in that book, on 1 page. And here's the good part about taking the time to do this. The benefit is how you're going to use it once you have it down, even for yourself. But once you do it the first time, you don't necessarily have to start from scratch next time. If you want to revisit it in a month or a quarter or 6 months or a year, it's not something you do every week. This is something you do initially. It's like the business plan. I'm going to get to this in a minute here, but it's like the business plan or the feasibility study that you wrote when you started your business or when you went to get funding for your business. And you just kind of use it and revise it as time goes on. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions on that? Okay. The second concept that I want to share with you is called the visionary and the integrator. While I was at this most recent company in Boston I was telling you about, he handed me a book. He said, have you ever read this series of books called The Traction Library? And it was more about developing strategy and documenting your strategy. But they have this one book that he handed to me, and it's called Rocket Fuel. And the reason it's called Rocket Fuel is because it describes these 2 personalities in a business, the visionary and the integrator. And though all of us have a little bit of both in us, most entrepreneurs are probably lean towards the visionary side of things. So I just want to read you a couple descriptions from this book. Here's the book. Of what a visionary is. It says, I'm just going to read a couple of them, but it says, you're the founding entrepreneur. You have lots of ideas, idea creation, growth ideas. You're strategic thinkers. You always see the big picture, have a pulse on the industry and target market, research and develop new products and services. And then it says what you do as a visionary is you're the entrepreneurial spark plug for the business. You're the inspirer. You're the passion provider. And you're the big problem solver. And that's just a short snippet of what it says. On the other hand, the integrator, what they say here, what you are as an integrator is you're personally accountable, you're adept at self-management, you're decisive, you're good at planning and organizing, you're a strong leader and manager, whatever that means for sure. You're effective at conflict management. And what you do is, that's what you are. What you do is you communicate, you focus, you hold people accountable, you strive to have team unity, you have well-managed projects. So you kind of get the flavor of the two different personalities that I was talking about in a business. And the book is about teaming those two together. It's interesting, as I read this book at the end of my career, I'm saying towards the end of my career now, I went back through all these different roles I've had, and I realized I'm not the visionary that I thought I was. I'm the integrator I didn't know I was, maybe. And so I remember not my first integrator role, but the first visionary, one of the first visionaries I came across was an inventor of these medical devices. And he was just full of ideas and jumping around, and he needed an integrator to keep him steady, I guess you'd say, and to get product out the door. So there was only 9 employees at this little business, and he hired me as a designer. And I think once I proved to him that I had some mechanical skills and could help him design products, he had some respect for me. And here's the funny part about being the integrator. And I wasn't an integrator when I started. I became his integrator. He was everything for a long time. But he would work really hard over the weekends, come into the shop, redesign something, and then on Monday morning, he'd come in and go, I'm changing this. We're going to change this. We're going to revise this quite often. And it was really frustrating as an engineer and a designer to put all this work into a project, only to have the owner come in and tell you that you're changing it. And so over time, I think I learned how to manage that changing, and also get him and other visionaries who ended up working for me as engineers, that you got to get a product out the door. And you can't just keep tweaking a design or tweaking an idea. You got to do something if you ever want to get anywhere. Does that make sense? Okay. So that's been pretty interesting for me. My role as an advisor and coach began as I was climbing the corporate ladder, and I realized that my coaching of my boss, my reports, my peers, was very similar to teaching. And I was actually able to pay my employees to learn, and in turn that supported what my department was trying to put together and what we were trying to accomplish. And then because the department accomplished it, the business accomplished it. In my integrator role as an independent organizational consultant, my primary responsibility is to support the owner's efforts to meet objectives. This usually is accomplished by some type of an audit that I perform, learning as much as I can about the business, talking to some of the employees, maybe some of the customers, maybe some of the suppliers, and formulating the right questions so that I can help that owner see their blind spots, because we all have them. And that's like one of the most important things that can help him with his business. So I would put the focus on the organizational challenges. So if I was going to consult for any of you in your business, I would sit down and have coffee with you and say, what are your challenges? What are your top 3 challenges? And that would be my ammunition to come back with a proposal and say, here's where I think I can help you. Because aren't those challenges the things that you want to get past? Here's another example of a company I was at where they hired a new communications person that was kind of semi-sales order entry. This is a smaller company. Up in the office was only about 8 people. And both customers and suppliers, when they had a question, whether it was about quality, regulatory, an order, or where the order status was, or accounting, it didn't matter what their question was, they would email the entire team. All 7 people would get an email from this customer. And it took me a while to realize that these people were just getting all these emails. So they were, the customer wasn't depending on this, but the company was depending on the brains of the employee to determine, well, is this a question for me, or is Myra going to handle this? Or is Doug going to handle this? You know? And I said, this is crazy, because they would reply all, and then you'd have 7 more emails. And so I helped them develop a communication plan, something the visionary owner didn't have time to do, for sure. And I worked with this new customer service rep, and I said, how should we develop a communication plan? And she said, well, I'll tell you what, I'll be the hub. All communication comes through me. Doesn't matter what they want to know, whether it's customer or supplier. I will take that email. So right there, you just eliminated a ton of email. And I will forward that request or question to the proper department or person to answer. And it was kind of like pulling teeth to get the owner to just buy into this and notify the customers and suppliers that this is what we were doing. So we did it anyway. We did it on our own, and the customers loved it. So now they never had to guess who they were sending a question to. They didn't have to blast it off to 10 people hoping somebody would answer. They knew who was accountable to get them the answer, whether they did it directly or indirectly. So that was a huge step forward for everybody on that team, because it reduced the number of emails they got per day. And we developed a process for communicating. Does that make sense? So that was a good example of one of the challenges that, it wasn't one of the owner's challenges, although it really was. It was one of the challenges of everybody in that management team. And I bet you they saved an hour and a half per day of time in reduced email. That's a lot of time in a week, so they could produce more orders. Any questions on that?
I got a quick question. I don't know if it's answerable, but what do you say to someone that says, one of my top 3 or my top problem is beyond my control, such as, you know, a barbershop that's closed or a restaurant that can only do takeout? Or do you just work for a plan for the future, or do you try and completely reorganize your business going forward as different from the way everything operated before?
Well, when it's beyond your control, like this COVID situation, I think you're going to have time to sit down and do both and make a decision tree analysis. I'm going to get to that in a minute here, and decide which path you want to go down. It has so much to do with desire. It has so much to do with your own personal values. So let me get to that in a minute. But just to close up on this integrator visionary thing, in a lot of businesses like mine, I'm just a sole proprietor. So I'm the visionary and the integrator. So I have documented my philosophy. I have documented my values. And I guess I'm just inspiring myself, but at least I have something. So I did have a client once ask me, I handed him my card. I got these new cards, and it's really super simple. It just says, management for your business or something, for your organization or something. And he goes, what does that mean? Because my card doesn't define it. And he made me go back to my hotel room and get him an answer. And I tracked him down and I gave him the answer. And it resulted in some work because it just happened to be what he needed for his business. Realizing that many of us are both the visionary and integrator, we have to understand and apply that to our organization. And, you know, it's really an example when you get big enough where you hire, let's say you're the visionary and you hire an integrator to execute, that's really a good example of teamwork when it works. I've seen that work with a lot of different employers now, either as an employee, when I was an employee, or when I was a consultant. So before I move on to decision-making, can one of you share with me like a third business concept that's been really good for you? I shared two of them with you. One was this working in the business and on the business, and the other one was this visionary integrator. Do one of you have something you could share that's been really good for your business? That's another concept that would be helpful for the rest of us? Something like your go-to thing?
I would just say, like, it was interesting how you spelled it out as visionary integrator, because that's 100% how my business partner and I operate. You know, he's more of the grand scheme overhead, taking care of the big picture, and then I'm more of the put it into motion. And I'd never heard it called out. You know, I've always heard it more of a, you know, an owner manager situation. But I'm interested to read this book and dive into that a little bit more. But
it's an easy read. Anybody else have a concept to share? Okay. I'd love to hear it and add it to my list. Of course, there's, you know, dozens of them. And in all these leadership books, you know, I don't want to say all of them, but a lot of them are saying the same thing in a different way, in, you know, different words. So I'm not ignorant to that either. So let me move on to decision making. I called it entrepreneurial decision making. Should I pursue a business after COVID? Or should I continue my business? Or should I go get a job? Here's some thoughts I want to share with you. Most decisions that we make, whether for our business, are based on our values, our talents, and our desires. If you go back to at the beginning, especially when you were young, that's what you chased. You might not have known you were chasing something you valued, but you were probably chasing something you really desired. So I'm going to give you a list of decision-making questions that I asked myself about my business due to COVID, okay? And then I'm going to encourage you to make your own list of questions, because mine are going to be different than yours because of a lot of different circumstances. But let me just talk about desire and talent for a minute. Think back in your mind. My first personal vision was to be a teacher and an inventor. I would say at 8 or 9 years old. I would tear things apart, try to put them back together. I loved teaching my little brother for some reason. I can't explain it. And I just get a thrill out of watching the light bulb come on in somebody else's head. So I went on to major in education and was a teacher for 2 years. And I've never really stopped teaching, whether it was teaching at work as a manager, teaching as a friend. I remember tutoring in college. I've taught at the different high schools in the area. I've taught at college classes. And so it was really important to me to want to share and teach people things and see them get that. But I also wanted to invent something. So I was really fortunate because I found this job, well, actually several different jobs. I worked at a window company for an old company in Portland called Mercer Steel. and they had a window division. That's where my parents bought windows when I was a kid. But I went to work there, and I got to redesign a window frame back in the 80s when R values, which is the inverse of a U value for insulation, was really a big deal. And so I got to look at the sections of aluminum and reduce aluminum but maintain the strength so that we could meet a certain R value for that window. And it was a blast. Even though aluminum windows went bye-bye shortly thereafter, and everybody went to thermal break or vinyl windows to get a lot better U values, not R values. It was fun to do that. So it was very satisfying. And then when I went to work for the medical device company, which was like 3 blocks away from the window company, I invited my boss, Mr. Mercer, over to see what we did. And there I got to really invent some stuff and got to patent different things, get my name on some patents, and then watch that thing go to market. So that was really thrilling for me. I'm saying all that because I got to fulfill some of my values and desires. And I obviously had a little bit of talent, otherwise I wouldn't have got where I was. So here's some of the questions I asked myself. Do you and or your organization have written values? I said yes. Are the values communicated often to all stakeholders? In my case, yes. And I said this includes customers, employees, and suppliers. It's amazing how much goodwill you can get with a customer or a supplier by sharing your values. My property manager, Brad, for my rentals is Holland Properties over there by Hawthorne Farms. And I just happened to share some values with the previous owners before they got bought out. But I also share some values with the maintenance coordinator. Her name's Teresa. And when I talk to her on email, when there's a problem at my place, and if it's over a certain dollar amount, she'll email me and say, just want to let you know about this. And because we somehow share some values, I don't even know what they are for sure, we communicate really well. And so that's a benefit. And it was a benefit for me to reach out to her when she first sent me that first email years ago saying, we got a problem at this rental property. Took a little extra time, but it was worth it. My next question for myself, are organizational decisions made fast or slow? This is a super broad question. So I have some subpoints to help me answer that question. Are organizational decisions usually made fast or slow? Let's see what time it is, 10:30. Okay. I said the gut versus analysis paralysis. So that covers the entire spectrum of decision making. If you're going by your gut, it's fast. If you're going into analysis paralysis, you're way over at the slow point. And it depends on the question, obviously, which is an easy way for me to answer. But you need to ask yourself, are you doing the right amount of research to make decisions? Here's a good example of it. I told you about Mr. Mercer working for the window company. Well, I was an integrator for him too. And something I was doing out at the plant by putting numbers up on a calendar really impressed him. And he promoted me, and I became the general product manager for the company. And one day we're back at the coffee machine, and he goes, David, how you doing? Are you challenged? I mean, this is true leadership of a really old guy. And he goes, are you challenged? And I said, yeah, I am. He goes, well, let me give you some advice. I said, great. He says, do the analysis paralysis, or check the details twice on the big bids and don't worry about it on the little bids. And this is the boss telling me this. And I'd never really thought about that before. So from that day forward, when I'd get a call from one of the salespeople wanting a price on something, if it was a screen clip or some minor little piece of something or other, I would make noise with my paper pages catalog and then give them a price. because the owner told me not to worry about $1 or 50 cent or 30 cent screen clip. He said, pay attention to the big jobs. That's where you do the digging. So hopefully that will help you guys in your decision making on where to go. If it's a big dollar amount, put a little more time into it. I said, in any moment of decision, this is a quote I want to read to you. In any moment of decision, the best thing you can do is the right thing. The next best thing you can do is the wrong thing. And the worst thing you can do is nothing. That's Teddy Roosevelt. And I love that quote because I worked for an owner who could not make a strategic decision. No matter how many different ways I presented it to him, he would not decide. He would sit there like this. He'd go, well, I have this guy on this shoulder telling me to do this. He was always in analysis paralysis or some kind of conflict. And it was very frustrating to me and the rest of the organization because we never knew what was going to be next. Was it going to be a new this or a new that or a new something or other? Does that make sense? That's why it's important for your people to understand what you're doing. So I love that quote. Next question I ask myself, do I want to continue to be a small business and or entrepreneur? Why or why not? You're going to ask yourself that question. I like it because I like the interaction with the people that I work with. Customers, their employees. I don't have as many suppliers, but that's why. I like the interaction. I like seeing something get accomplished. Do I want to support my employees, suppliers, and customers in the future? Why or why not? That's more for you people, not me. I only have one ongoing client, and I do want to support them, and I work for them every week for no money at this point because we're looking for funding. But I do want to be a support to others. It's just part of why I get up in the morning. Do I want to retire, assuming it's a choice? The answer here, what did I put down? Yes, I do, but can I afford to? Yes, I do, but would I get bored? This COVID-19 experience has shown me that my interaction with people really dropped off the first month from March 15th to April 15th, because I wasn't on the phone with a bunch of customers like many of you were probably. And then we started Zooming here at the chamber, and I got all kinds of interaction. Even though it's not as personal, it's still fulfilling. The next question I ask myself, do I want to work for somebody else? And I always say yes if the opportunity is right, for sure. Why not? Part-time. I got a lot of projects going on over here due to COVID at my place. Are you in business for the long or short term? That's another important question. We'll talk a little more about it. So here's a list of questions I had to ask myself. And so let me ask you people, what are some other additional factors your business must address? In addition to these questions, which is kind of centered around my business, what are some other factors that you would brainstorm out to ask yourself?
One of the questions we asked was, how do we support our employees? How do we keep paying them if revenues plummet? And does that mean we take pay cuts at a greater rate than we pay, or that we cut our employees? Do we not cut our employees' pay at all and cut ours significantly? I mean, that was one of the biggest decisions was, we want to keep them paid full-time, full hours, and how are we going to go about doing it?
So can you go down that path a little further? You gave the answer there. Tell us how it's worked.
So
how did you come to that decision first, that you want to pay them full time?
Well, we looked at our employees, and we looked at, we're small. We only have, at full capacity in summers, we have 9 people, including ownership and part-time labor type stuff. but we have a quote unquote family atmosphere, multiple long-term employees, that we just wanted to keep going. And we knew that, they were the breadwinners of their families. And if there was any possibility, we were going to keep doing it. So we did analysis based on, multiple different levels of cuts in revenue and multiple different levels in cuts in pay, more from the top down rather than the, management taking cuts more so than quote unquote labor in the field. And, we based our decision off of that. And it's a month by month decision of, what are the revenues this month? And as long as we can afford to keep paying, we haven't laid anybody off. We have one person that's office staff that's considered higher risk just because of age. And she's been at home furloughed, I guess you could say, for this since day one, but we're still paying her. And so we've been able to maintain that, but it is definitely, we set that as a goal and we've tried to figure out how to do it, and it's ever changing to hit that goal. So.
And this is with reduced rents, reduced revenue.
Correct. So we were, that was the thing, is we were worried, we did a calculation assuming we could probably continue on it at worst case 50% reduction in rents. I mean, it would be a lot of cuts, but we could continue to pay people. If it dropped below that, then we would have bigger long-term problems. And that's assuming, if that happened for 1 or 2 months. If it was that low for, 8 months in a row, then, everything else is off the table, and it's, what do we do now? But
good.
Our revenue has definitely changed. So.
Yeah, mine too. Anybody else have a factor they want to share? Please don't be timid. I get tired of hearing myself.
I'm Rochelle Jones. I'm fairly new to the chamber. Want to say hello and reach out. I am a professional artist. My company is Rochelle Jones Art Gallery, Fine Art, and I'm a painter. And for me personally, I'm the only one that works for me. So I'm the visionary, most definitely. Creative as whatever can be creative you can find, I'm there. The instigator, I should say. My businesses in the past, I've worked for corporate Northwest Natural Gas as well as Acumed in the medical device. And I will say for me, what I have had to really step back, like the zoom in, zoom out, and find my niche. How many professional artists provide videos or books or classes, that kind of thing. I had to really think about what am I doing, or what is unique to me and my business that would want to extend, or how do I say this, that I could show my uniqueness to everyone else to do business with me. Okay, what do I provide different than my competition? So I to step out of doing my business, see what my competition was doing, especially during this COVID situation. And my uniqueness has always been to provide classes face-to-face and have everyone in the class paint something different. Well, that is something that I have found no one else does. Usually everybody walks away with the same painting, but it looks different. So with this COVID, even doing the Zoom meetings and such, I have provided materials shipped to them, scheduled classes, and that's how we've worked around it versus the face-to-face. But again, it's been difficult. Some people cannot either afford it or find that is something they're so nervous about. Art can sometimes be intimidating, frustrating, and when you don't have your instructor there to help you and show you, it can be difficult at times. But I will have to say that this has been a pleasant blessing because it has allowed people to focus on something else versus at home alone. Social aspects have changed.
Okay, thanks. That's good. Anybody else? Thanks, Rochelle. All right. In brief, decision-making is the cornerstone of entrepreneurship and leadership, in my opinion. And that's because it's tied to what we really want. It's tied to our values. So let me move on. So my challenge to you after that last section is to create your own decision-making assumptions or your own decision-making questions. Put them in writing, then take the time to answer each one in detail. And then here's my real advice. Once you've done this and you've written these questions, and I'll share this outline with you for whoever wants it, document your values, talents, and desires, create your assumptions and your decision-making factors, and then review it with somebody. Have somebody review it with you. It could be a coach, your wife, your partner, and have them say, is this it? Is this all of our decision-making factors? And then hopefully they'll say, no, it's not. Here's some blind spots. I'll never forget when I had my engineering team at Acumed doing some leadership work. We were the same coach and trainer that I referred to earlier, Larry Briggs. We were doing some training and I had to go take an important phone call. No, I had to go take a phone call. And so I walked out, and when I came back in the room, this is about 12 people, I think. Larry said, hey, Dave, while you were out, we were talking about you and we want to know if we can tell you something. In other words, can we tell you about your blind spot? And I'm like, no, you can't. And I sat down and they told me anyway. And they were right. They were super right. And so I've worked on that particular skill ever since. And if they wouldn't have given it to me, I probably would have never, improved at all, or very little, or gotten worse for that matter. So that was pretty good. I was appreciative of that. Have any of you gone through the same process that I just described, where you write some factors down, you review it with a person, and you come up with a better list, or a better list of factors or questions as a result of reviewing it with somebody? Anybody do that?
I have, yes.
Okay, good. I think that's a great thing. What Hill Hub offers these office hours, and I think that's a great venue to have somebody do that, because you can do it by subject. You can do it by accounting, you can do it by strategy, you can do it, and they have all kinds of different people who are volunteering their time to just listen to you. Okay, let me go to my next point. We're perfect on time. Should I take on debt to pursue commerce and scale my organization? So should I take on debt to jumpstart or continue my business? I got 3 things I want to say about this, and then I'd love to hear your thoughts, because I'm obviously missing something. First, take a second look at the assumptions and decision-making factors that you made above about your organization. So you really should have those in place before you answer this question. Only you can determine the amount of risk you're willing to take or pursue success. So you have to take your risk temperature. Nobody can do that for you. Or you and your partners need to. Then in brief, if you are a business, this is just here's a gut check. If you're in business for the long term and you can project a date in the future based on your plans, then debt is a great tool to use. But if you're a short-term position, you may not generate the cash flow and or net income to repay a loan or investors. That's probably the category I'm in. I don't know for sure that I'll be generating enough clients. So debt may not be something I want to do in this case. So that's number 1. So the risk is about you and your, what's that word people use? Your risk, not your risk profile, but what the risk tolerance you're willing to take. Okay. So in addition to your risk analysis above, financial projections are at the heart of your answer to pursue future commerce, because we talked about breaking even and cash flow positive. However, Projections are easy to build. It's just math. It's really simple math. And there are many resources to get help on a spreadsheet if you need some. The more difficult pieces are the assumptions that you use to build your projections, what I call your strategic plan, which I referred to earlier. Let me give you an example of this. At Acumed, we were mom and pop sold, and we were owned by a corporate in Chicago, and we had what you called an annual budget. They called it a budget because it came out of the 50s. And so you went to these budget meetings and you presented your budget with at least the top 2 or 3 people at corporate, and you presented what you were going to do for the year. And so I was always a part of that ever since we got bought. And then when I became president in 2008, then I became like the leader of this budget. So I was the president for 5 years, and it took me the first 2 years, maybe 3 years, to get my direct reports to understand that I was not asking them for a budget. I was asking them for a strategic plan, because your budget is a result of the activities that you plan to do in your strategic plan, not vice versa. You don't build your budget first and then say, here's what I can afford to do. What you do is you develop your strategic plan because you know that this is the right thing to do. And then you build the budget to match those activities. If you can't afford to do all the activities, then you start cutting the activities. So this was pretty funny because my CFO and I would meet with every direct report, every director before a budget meeting, before we submitted a budget. And I changed the name to strategic plan and budget. And they'd sit down at this little table in my office and they would give me numbers first. And I said, what are these numbers based on? That's what I want to see. I want to see your plans. Because it was really common for the marketing department, and we're talking about a high margin, high profit business in medical devices. And, oops, sorry, I got some home, my dog walked in my office, or my wife's dog walked in the office, so a little distraction. Buddy, I don't got anything for you right now. So what I wanted to see from these directors was the activities that they were going to do and what was the return on investment for these activities. Because usually they couldn't spend as much money as they were putting in their budget anyway. It was really rare for them to exceed how much money they said they were going to spend in a particular year. So I lost track for a second there. Hold on. So anyway, I guess my point is it's important to have a strategic plan and the activities you're going to do first, then tie the budget to it. And it's that same strategic plan that all your answers for everything you're going to share with your stakeholders comes right out of that thing. So it's all one big usable piece of work. But I do have one note. So I gave you two things. One's about risk and one's about projections. But here's one other note. There's a lot of times that there's strategic reasons to take on debt that have nothing to do with cash flow positive and may have a lot to do with risk. Okay, that's when we have a strategic reason to pursue a product or a mission. This could apply in any business. I can think of ways this would apply in your business, Brad, because you may do something for a strategic reason that may help long-term, that won't help you short-term. But when it comes to a product, it's about fit, complementing some other products, filling out the product line or a service line. If it's a mission, it could be a calling that you're called to do. It could be a belief you have, or it could be a social need. So there's strategic reasons, I'm calling them strategic reasons. There's other reasons to take on debt besides just cash flow positive. Although that's the first thing that jumps out to us because, well, you know, we're here to make money, you know. Does that make sense? Okay, any other words of wisdom on this, on pursuing debt that you can
I took some classes for at the Portland State Real Estate Development Group. It was a certificate going towards a master's. But anyways, one of the real estate finance professors he always harped on, and we would do this, but I never really put words to it. But your analysis is only as good as your assumptions. So like in a real estate development type situation, which could be for any product, you can kind of skew your analysis numbers or your assumptions in your analysis to make it look better than it really is.
Sure.
And it's a very dangerous, slippery slope to walk down. To try and convince yourself that, hey, this project or this product is going to be profitable, but one of those little, factors in your analysis are way out of whack, but you've convinced yourself that you can achieve that. And so that was one thing that, you can, instead of the analysis paralysis, that can be the opposite of that you underanalyzed your numbers and then you create something and you don't realize it till it's too late.
Yeah, I used to tell my managers no pet projects, because then they could make the numbers look however they wanted to. That's why I wanted to see the activities and what the numbers represented, because the activities you could lie on that too, I guess, but it's harder to lie. And your assumptions are so key. You're right. That's good. Okay, so here's my advice as far as taking on debt. I'm going to reiterate what I've kind of said, but I suggest that you formulate your organizational strategy over a 1-year period. Project revenue volumes and associated operational structures required to support your organization. I said list both revenue and related expenses for each activity. So this could be equipment, people, customers, obviously, people, roles and responsibilities, space, supplies, sales and marketing, Zoom cost. I'm thinking of Rochelle now, and she has a kind of a different model. She's not manufacturing or real estate. She's really, and it's kind of a service thing, although she does also do art, it sounds like, for products. Then put your strategic plans in writing. I keep hounding on that, but it's important. And I'm going to say, similar to the business plan or feasibility study you drafted before starting your business. I might have said that already. Use the appropriate assumptions on the economy, political and local environment, and any other outside environmental factors, like Brad suggested earlier, things beyond your control. You have to guess something, even if they're beyond your control, and a lot of them are. Then build your projections based on your activities. In light of your projections and break even, now determine how much debt is required for you to reach cash flow positive, including debt servicing. That just means usually the more money you put into a business, the faster you're going to get cash flow positive. So you need to balance that with how much you take and how much you think you can do versus what you can really do. I think a lot of us think we can do more than we can do as fast as we can do it. So there's no reason to take on debt until you need it. Make sense? That's like me laying bark dust around my house. I can order 7 or 8 yards of it, or a huge amount, knowing that I'm going to use it. But if it takes me 6 months to use it, was that really economical, or did I just have this pile of bark just sitting there all summer? That's what I'm kind of saying. And of course, I wasn't paying interest on my bark dust. I just had to look at it. I say review your strategic plan and projections with your partner, accountant, or business consultant to help support your decision. And then get to work and execute. Does that all make sense to you folks? Okay. I did have one more thing on organizational structure scaling, and it's really brief, but we only have a couple minutes. Should I just run through it?
Well, if you can get it done in 3 minutes.
Yeah, I hate rushing.
Yeah.
I'll just say this. There's some key factors in scaling a business, and I think I'm just going to say this. It all centers around how well you did in communicating your strategy to your stakeholders, because you really can make, and I've proven this over and over and over, you can make a group of people more productive by them knowing the why. There's a book out, a business book called Why, and it's about sharing the mission and inspiring them. I mean, part of the job is to inspire. I did work at this one business where a couple different businesses, not just one. Every morning when I got there, my first thing to do is walk through the manufacturing plant saying hi to people, just checking in. I want them to see me. I want them to know I'm there for them. I wanted to try to inspire them. I get to know them a little bit, talk to them, and make them feel good. It make me feel good. And sometimes I'd take a cup of coffee with me. Sometimes I'd remember somebody's kid's name or something. But that's really at the core of what scalability is about. It's not just throwing warm bodies at things. That's probably the worst thing you can do. But to plan it out is really good. I hope that was helpful.
Yeah, I think everything you presented was very helpful. When you hear it, you're like, this seems like common sense, but to actually document it, put it on paper, and think about it in a step-by-step process rather than the random thoughts bouncing around in your head, you know, it makes the strategy much better, I think.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. I guess we're out of time. It's 10:59. I want to thank you, David. That was very informative. And I do know that you are not a supplier, an expert at the Hill Hub. So if anybody wants to reach out to David, he does do consulting, and you know, we used him at the Chamber for the Small Business Entrepreneurial Council, and it was very helpful. And especially when you have multiple people trying to get them on the same page, it really helps. So
and we're doing it by Zoom now, so it's cool.
Yeah, quick and easy. Next week we have looks like we have on the 19th, Washington County Health Department is going to have somebody on to discuss the current situation of reopening Washington County. It could be very interesting since Washington County is one of the ones that hasn't applied to open yet. And then Richard, it looks like you're doing a presentation next week as well. And then our Friday one is a business roundup with a debrief with Deanna just on anything new that's come out. And hopefully she'll have some information because she jumped off this call to do a call with the governor's office that was doing a press conference. So that's all I have. I want to thank everybody for coming, and hopefully we'll see you next week.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, David.
You're welcome. Thank you.